So once you find that out, then you know that you're put here for a reason. So there has to be a creator. We're not talking about the creator. We're talking about Jesus.
Oh, you're talking about Jesus of Nazareth.
That guy.
Okay, yeah.
I guess we're not talking about Sky Daddy. We're talking about Sky Daddy Jr.
Jesus is just alright, oh yeah. Jesus is just alright with.
One is we need to go back like psychotherapy and sort out the past, get clear, realize that we've kind of been caught up in false memory syndrome. We haven't seen the way things actually were. And then we can let go of literalism. We can let go of blind belief that somebody did it for us. The idea, the horrendous idea, that if you don't believe this, you'll be tortured forever when you die by a God of love, you know, this crazy stuff. And instead move into a new form of experiential, direct experience. More and more people spontaneously and naturally are having this awakening occur. And we are continuing a evolutionary current of which the ancient pagans, the Pythagoreans were a part, the ancient Egyptians were a part, the Gnostics were a part, and it's come through, and we're still continuing that thread today. And if we can honor that thread and make that journey, then we can create a more loving and a more unified world.
I am the highest version of myself. I'm the highest version of myself. I know I am that I am.
Recording audio live, and I got 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and 20 seconds.
I don't know what any of that means. Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Godspeed Podcast. I am Joe Guy.
I am Dan.
With the plan.
With the plan.
Stop. Why does the don't crossed out?
Oh.
Don't stop. Oh, don't stop. Stop believing.
It says stop.
Yes. Yes, everybody saw the episode last year. Stop believing.
This is my edit. I edited this shirt specifically for how I feel about the holidays these days. My job has 100% taken the joy out of holidays. So thank you for that. I appreciate the paychecks. You guys kill the Christmas spirit. Oh, it's,
What?
no, they do, and it's partly because the humans human interaction with people, you know, it's part of it.
That makes sense to me.
The other part is the demand of my job, which, you know, I signed up for it, so that's on me. But you know, you can kind of control that. You can control how much you work your employees, and you know, my CEO did say make sure you spend time with family this year and take care of your health and your mental health. But you know, I'm working like 70 hours a week. It's fine. One day off, but you know, one day off a week.
Modern day slavery.
But you know, it is what it is. Like
modern day slavery is exactly.
Like I said,
what it is.
I do enjoy my paycheck, so I can't really complain.
Everybody enjoys the paycheck. Let's get into it. So this. No, what were you gonna say?
No, so
No. You said so what?
Stop believing.
Yeah, stop believing. Don't be like Journey. Do the opposite of what Journey says.
Right.
That's Journey, right?
I don't know.
Or is that Boston?
I have no idea.
I think it's Journey.
I've journeyed to Boston a couple times.
So this was originally supposed to be McDonald's today, but that's getting moved. It's getting moved because this episode is going to be a two-parter. Because when I was doing the evidence gathering for the episode, there's a lot of it. So this is going to end up being a two-part episode, and then McDonald's is going to get pushed back after Christmas. And I wanted this to run before Christmas, both these episodes, because this episode is about Jesus, my lawnmower. It's about Jesus.
Oh,
You're a carpenter.
Ha.
Yeah, Sky Daddy today, bud.
Sky Daddy.
So before we get into it, which we need to get into it, or these episodes are going to be so fucking long, what is your stance on religion?
Religion. I think my family was Catholic. I remember going to Catholic churches as a child.
Okay.
I've tried to read the Bible, can never really get through it. It's kind of
Yeah.
As a young adult into adulthood, I did choose to go to a church a few times, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't also love it. I just, with all the things that happen in the world with the churches, I can't seem to get behind them.
I get it.
I do like the idea of, faith, right? But I can't get behind Sky Daddy. I can't get behind.
So, so no religion, basically.
Right.
This is just based on the evidence that I've gathered. I happen to believe these theories, but I'm going to try to do this in a non-disrespectful way because a lot of this is a Christian country, you know what I mean? So,
right.
Just if you don't want to watch this episode, it is about Jesus. So just turn it off.
I think it's more likely we were put here by aliens than we were by.
It has nothing to do with. This doesn't have to do with God. It has to do with Jesus. Because I believe there's a one conscious creator out there. Because I believe I know the Earth is flat. So once you find that out, then you know that you're put here for a reason. So there has to be a creator. We're not talking about the creator. We're talking about Jesus.
Oh, you're talking about Jesus of Nazareth.
That guy.
Okay. Yeah.
But I guess we're not talking about Sky Daddy. We're talking about Sky Daddy Jr.
Okay.
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 All right, let's get going. This lady is gonna break some stuff down for you.
Sky Daddy Jr. All right.
Yeah.
And also, if we're talking about the non-biblical evidence, supposedly, of Jesus Christ's existence, which to look at the historical record of the day. We look at the historical record of when this supposedly happens, you find nothing. That might be very shocking to people who have been told that Jesus Christ was the most famous person who ever lived. The New Testament itself has some 24 scriptures in which Jesus is touted as being famed wide and far. He's doing miracles that are shocking people. 500, 1 Corinthians, 500 people saw him resurrected. At his death, there were earthquakes, the sun darkens, the saints rise up out of the ground, and they wander through the streets of Jerusalem.
And the graves were opened, and many bodies of the saints which slept arose, and came out of the graves after his resurrection, and went into the holy city, and appeared unto many.
You can't just say, oh, provide me all kinds of evidence for this and that, but I'm satisfied with none for this. This is not scientific. You must sit and say to yourself, why isn't this in the historical record of the day? There were people writing at the time. It's called one of the best documented periods in history. They were very eloquent writers, and they certainly would have noticed, even if they took no notice of some rabble-rousing guy who was rampaging through the streets and going into the temples and leading great crowds and feeding 5,000 with fishes and loaves and all. You would think someone would mention him. But even if they didn't mention him, you would think someone would notice the other issues that were going on at the time. The temple veil is rent in its midst when Jesus is crucified. That means that there was damage to the temple. Now that should have been recorded somewhere. The Jews were very possessive and very protective of their temple. If somebody had come in there, even earlier in the story, he threatens to throw the temple down. You'd think they'd be writing about this guy. What a knucklehead, he's threatening us, and yada yada, he's calling us sons of Satan, he's criticizing. You would think somebody would notice that and be grousing about it. Even, the persecution, the supposed persecution of the Christians by Paul, who was Saul at the time, that doesn't make it into the historical record. And it's not like I said, it was only a 90-mile stretch of territory. It's not like this was off on Mars or something. It's a small area, and by that time, as I say, there was plenty of construction going on there. It's a crossroads going down from the European continent into Egypt. There was a lot of traffic going through there for many centuries. This is not some isolated area. There would be plenty of people passing through who would have heard these stories, who would have been amazed, who would have gone into another part of the country or into Egypt, or we had Philo Judea of Alexandria, Judea, right, living at that time, at that exact time. Here is a Jewish man living in Alexandria, part of the wealthiest family probably on the planet. His writings were significant. They make up a very large book today. They were distributed in his lifetime because of his wealthy family. In that book, those books, he talks about the incarnate word, the logos. This logos idea had been developed significantly by the Greeks, the living word of God. Philo describes what the word ends up as in the New Testament to a T.
The Logos of the living God is the bond of everything, holding all things together. Philo. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Colossians 1:17.
It's like they lifted it and put it into the New Testament. And yet, while he was writing this, in his homeland, his word supposedly took incarnation right there at that time. And he had no idea. No mention of it, no concept, no interest. Didn't even say, hey, I hear that my word has taken birth in my homeland. Doesn't even say that. Doesn't say a thing. You have to wonder, why? Is it because it didn't happen? Is it because they used Philo's writings to create this fictional character? If you read Philo's writings, which were published in the mid-20s, before Jesus was doing his ministry, never been heard of. He's still doing his carpentry work, according to Christian tradition. Philo's writings have so many Christian ideas in them that you really have to wonder. If you had that kind of pipeline, and your works are that well known, and then sometime later, these same ideas end up almost verbatim, some of them end up in the gospel story. It seems to be pretty obvious when you factor in all of the factors that you need to understand the context and milieu of the day. The only way you can sustain this story, really, is to have it in a vacuum, is to remove all practicality around it, all the other cultures. And seriously, you would have to be absolutely ignorant of all history, mythology, culture, language of the time in order to maintain that story. Unfortunately, that's what we find. There's quite a lot of ignorance and willful ignorance in order to convince themselves that 2,000 years ago, the God of the cosmos came to Earth through the womb of a young virgin girl of a particular ethnicity, performed miracles like healing the blind, walking on water, and raising the dead, transfiguring on a mount, calming a storm, being crucified himself, obviously, and that resurrecting himself from the dead and ascending into heaven. They require, pretty much no proof, no evidence, other than the New Testament. A few books, a few hundred pages, that's all they require. And so that standard is really quite low. There are no physical artifacts from the first century. We don't have any autographs or originals of the Gospels or the epistles. We have no evidence in the literary record of the existence of the canonical Gospels as we have them before the end of the 2nd century. In other words, they're not quoted verbatim anywhere before that. They don't appear in the historical record. Nobody mentions them. We have no evidence showing that they really were written by the people in whose names they are presented. We don't even really have any evidence that those particular individuals, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, actually lived as they're depicted in the New Testament. In fact, we barely have evidence that St. Paul lived. There is the stories that are told about him where he's brought before Caesar, he's rampaging with hundreds of troops, he's in a shipwreck, he escapes from a prison in Rome. All of these fairly significant events do not make it into the historical record in any way, shape, or form. And so there's no physical artifacts, as I say, from the time that this happened. There's no information in any writings of the day, contemporary writings. And so there really is absolutely no evidence for this entire story other than the New Testament.
What you think?
So, I just piggyback a lot of what you said, because I've heard a lot of this, and there's so much documentation, timelines about the Romans, Julius Caesar, that time. Like, we know where dude was on what day. Like, it's all been documented, but there isn't very specifics about Jesus.
There's none.
all of these crazy things that he did. There isn't specifics, right? So not like there is about the other big moments in history. That's all been documented. So.
Yeah, we're gonna get into more, because more people give you more examples of just ridiculous. We'll keep going, but yeah. I'm with you.
Is there any non-biblical historical evidence of any person living with the name Jesus, the son of Mary, who traveled about with 12 followers, healing people and the like? There are numerous historians who lived in and around the Mediterranean, either during or soon after the assumed life of Jesus. How many of these historians document this figure? Not one. However, to be fair, that doesn't mean defenders of the historical Jesus haven't claimed the contrary. 4 historians are typically referenced to justify Jesus' existence. Pliny the Younger, Suetonius, and Tacitus are the first 3. Each one of their entries consists of only a few sentences at best, and only referred to Christus or the Christ, which in fact is not a name but a title. It means the Anointed One. The 4th source is Josephus, and this source has been proven to be a forgery for hundreds of years. Sadly, it is still cited as truth. You would think that a guy who rose from the dead and ascended into heaven for all eyes to see and performed the wealth of miracles acclaimed to him would have made it into the historical record. It didn't, because once the evidence is weighed, there are very high odds that the figure known as Jesus did not even exist.
There you go. Jesus never existed.
Lots of historians keeping records, writing things down.
Yeah.
Not much, they
No Jesus, my lawnmower's not there.
Right.
This is not me not being disrespectful.
And I used to work with this lady who was from the Middle East, and I actually have a candle, from somewhere around here. I have candles from, what? Go ahead. You're smiling. Like I'm gonna...
Is it, what's her name?
No.
Ah, okay.
No. This lady was a pharmacist at at a place I used to work.
Okay.
And she actually went back to the Middle East and visited Jesus's hometown and brought me literal candles from his hometown that were made there, whatever.
Oh.
And we would talk, I would talk religion with her. I wasn't scared about it. I would talk religion. And I was like, I just kind of find it hard that there was a Mark, a David, a Daniel from that place. And she proceeded to tell me, that, they've changed the names or updated them or, made them palatable to different cultures. But maybe, there is no documentation of Jesus.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You love this guy.
Okay. Oh, God.
There were dozens of historians who lived in the Mediterranean throughout the supposed life of Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. Aulus, Columella, Justus of Tiberias, Livy, Lucaris, Luctus Florus, Petronius, Phaedrus, Philo Judaeus, Phlegon, Plutarch, Pomponius Mela, Rufus Curtius, Tilon, Quintus Curtius, Seneca, Silas Italicus, Theon of Smyrna, Valerius Flaccus, Valerius Maximus. None of them so much as mentioned Jesus, his family, or his followers. Wouldn't you think someone who was immaculately conceived, who performed miracles, was revered by thousands and hated by thousands more, someone who was crucified for all our sins then resurrected from death, wouldn't he be mentioned at least once outside the Bible? Characters are often interchangeable within the Bible itself. Joseph in the Old Testament is analogous to Jesus in the New Testament. Joseph was born of a miracle birth, had 12 brothers, one of whom, Judah, suggests the sale of Joseph for 20 gold pieces. Jesus was born of a miracle birth, had 12 disciples, one of whom, Judas, who suggested the sale of Jesus for 30 gold pieces. They both began their work at 30. Are we to believe that these are literal people living remarkable, coincidental, analogous existences, or are they personifications, symbols? There are actually, in total, 15 pre-Christian gods who had traits and stories exactly like Jesus Christ. For example, in 900 BC, Krishna was born of a virgin with a star in the east signaling his coming. A tyrant slaughtered thousands of infants trying to kill the newborn king. He was a teacher in the temple and a healer who performed miracles, was crucified between 2 thieves, and resurrected from death. Around the same time period in Greece lived the god Attis, born of a virgin on December 25th. He was martyred on a crucifix, died for 3 days, and was resurrected. Mithra was a Persian god, circa 1200 BC, who was born of a virgin on December 25th, traveled around with 12 disciples, performed miracles, died for 3 days, and was resurrected. He was called the Truth, the Light, and was worshipped on Sunday. The very same basic storyline that came out of Constantine's Council of Nicaea in 325 AD already existed for thousands of years. Helen Ellerby wrote, Christianity resembled certain elements of Roman belief, particularly the worship of Mithra, or Mithraism. As protector of the empire, Mithra was closely tied to the sun gods Helios and Apollo. Mithra's birthday on December 25th, close to the winter solstice, became Jesus' birthday. Shepherds were to have witnessed Mithra's birth and were to have partaken in a Last Supper with Mithra before he returned to heaven. Mithra's ascension, correlating to the sun's return to prominence around the spring equinox, became the Christian holiday of Easter. Christians took over a cave temple dedicated to Mithra in Rome on the Vatican Hill, making it the seat of the Catholic Church. The Mithraic high priest's title, Pater Patrum, soon became the title for the Bishop of Rome, Papa or Pope. The The fathers of Christianity explained the remarkable similarities of Mithraism as the work of the devil, declaring the much older legends of Mithraism to be an insidious imitation of the one true faith. All the following pre-Christian deities shared the myth of a virgin birth on December 25th, crucifixion and resurrection. Krishna of Hindustan, Buddha Sakya of India, Salavahana of Bermuda, Zulus and Osiris of Egypt, Odin of the Scandinavians, Krite of Chaldea, Zoroaster and Mithra of Persia, Baal and Tot of Phoenicia, Indra of Tibet, Bali of Afghanistan, Jao of Nepal, Watoba of the Bilinganese, Tammuz of Syria, Attis of Phrygia, Salmosis of Thrace, Zor of the Bonzes, Adad of Assyria, Devatat and Somanokadam of Siam, Alcides of Thebes, Mikado of the Sintus, Bedru of Japan, Jesus, Eros, and Bramilla of the Druids, Thor of the Gauls, Cadmus of Greece, Hil and Feda of the Mandaites, Gentote and Quetzalcoatl of Mexico, Universal Monarch of the Sibyls, Ishi of the island of Formosa, Divine Teacher of Plato, Holy One of Shaka, Fohi and Tien of China, Adonis of Greece, Prometheus of Caucasus, and Ixion and Quirinius of Rome. As Jordan Maxwell said, "Were you aware that there were 15 major religions that had the same identical teachings as Christianity? Most people aren't. And I'm very suspect of a 16th religion, which is copied off of 15 previous religions, and I am told that this one is the truth."
What you think so far? I know you don't like Eric Dubé, but he listed off so many historical figures from different cultures that have the exact same backstory.
Yeah, it's kind of weird, right?
Not historical figures, but, you know, myths and shit. Yeah.
Right. Where people have, it's, I mean,
yo, it doesn't make any.
The math ain't mathin', right?
Yeah.
Isn't that the name of the game? The math ain't mathin'.
That's always the name of the game in this show.
Yeah. Unfortunately, sorry, but it's definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll save my thesis for the end, I guess.
All right. All right, we'll keep chugging along.
Chug, chug, chug.
Chug, chug, chug.
Furthermore, the character of Jesus being a literary and astrological hybrid is most explicitly a plagiarization of the Egyptian sun god Horus. For example, inscribed about 3,500 years ago on the walls at the Temple of Luxor in Egypt are images of the Annunciation, the miracle conception, the birth, and the adoration of Horus. The images begin with Thoth announcing to the Virgin Isis that she will conceive Horus, then Neph, the Holy Ghost, impregnating the Virgin, and then the virgin birth and the adoration. This is exactly the story of Jesus' miracle conception. In fact, the literary similarities between the Egyptian religion and the Christian religion are staggering. And the plagiarism is continuous. The story of Noah and Noah's Ark is taken directly from tradition. The concept of the Great Flood is ubiquitous throughout the ancient world, with over 200 cited claims in different periods and times. However, one need look no further for a pre-Christian source than the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in 2600 BC. This story talks of a great flood commanded by God, an ark with saved animals upon it, and even the release and return of a dove, all held in common with the biblical story, among many other similarities. And then there is the plagiarized story of Moses. Upon Moses' birth, it is said that he was placed in a reed basket and set adrift in a river in order to avoid infanticide. He was later rescued by a daughter of royalty and raised by her as a prince. This baby in a basket story was lifted directly from the myth of Sargon of Akkad of around 2250 BC. Sargon was born, placed in a reed basket in order to avoid infanticide, and set adrift in a river. He was in turn rescued and raised by Aki, a royal midwife. Furthermore, Moses is known as the lawgiver, the giver of the Ten Commandments, the Mosaic Law. However, the idea of a law being passed from God to a prophet up on a mountain is also a very old motif. Moses is just another lawgiver in a long line of lawgivers in mythological history. In India, Manu was the great lawgiver. In Crete, Minos ascended Mount Dicta, where Zeus gave him the sacred laws, while in Egypt there was Nesis, who carried stone tablets and upon them the laws of God were written. Manu, Minos, Nesis, Moses.
Pausing it right there. So this isn't just Jesus didn't exist. This is everybody in the New Testament. It's an allegory. It's a story. They're not real.
Yeah, I think it's a way that they obviously it's a way that they're trying to control the masses, right?
Yeah.
And they figured out,
worship,
but also fear, right?
Yeah.
Control people with fear. And
you're going to hell.
You're going to hell. You're, especially back then when there wasn't as much sophisticated. I know you don't like the word science, but there wasn't as much sophisticated science as there
wasn't.
as there is now, anyways, or it was different.
Supposedly,
and you could easily manipulate people with stories of, actually, maybe there was more science, but we have things called cell phones now, and they all have cameras on them. Right?
Yeah,
and that's one easy way to dispel myth is, Pixar didn't happen, right? So everybody started taking pictures and videos of everything. So now we have a easy way to dispel or prove our myths, and they probably didn't have that back then. So people just would guess what I saw, right?
Yeah,
whether they really saw it or not. So.
Or the New Testament was created after they reset everything, and the reason why there's no evidence of Jesus is because it's just a couple hundred years the New Testament was around, and they want us to believe Jesus was an actual guy.
Right, for some strange reason. I don't know.
Getting more into it.
Okay. All right.
And as far as the Ten Commandments, they are taken outright from spell 125 in the Egyptian Book of the Dead. What the Book of the Dead phrased, "I have not stolen," became "Thou shalt not steal." "I have not killed," became "Thou shalt not kill." "I have not told lies," became "Thou shalt not bear false witness," and so forth. In fact, the Egyptian religion is likely the primary foundational basis for the Judeo-Christian theology. Baptism, afterlife, final judgment, virgin birth, death and resurrection, crucifixion, the Ark of the Covenant, circumcision, saviors, Holy Communion, Great Flood, Easter, Christmas, Passover, and many, many more are all attributes of Egyptian ideas long predating Christianity and Judaism.
Yeah.
I just think it's, I don't know, man. It's really strange and hard to get into when, like I said, I think it's a way for them to control the masses, but then also go back and the things that they do to their followers. Like,
yeah.
I mean.
Yeah. Bro. Bruh. All right, we'll keep going. This is Jordan Maxwell.
Okay.
Tony Bushby says that church experts admit to no evidence of the existence of the Gospels for at least a century after the time it is said Jesus Christ was born in a manger. The most ancient literature fails to show any trace of the acquaintance with, nor the use of, the Gospels we know today. It is not possible to find in any writings compiled between the beginning of the 1st century and the middle of the 2nd century any reference to Jesus Christ or the Gospel. Now, Timothy Freak and Peter Gandy, they write, the traditional history of Christianity is hopelessly inadequate to the facts. From our research into ancient spirituality, it has become obvious that we must fundamentally revise our understanding of Christian origins in the most shocking of ways. Our conclusion, supported by a considerable body of evidence in our book, The Jesus Mysteries, is that Christianity was not a new religion. It was a continuation of paganism by another name. The gospel story of Jesus is not the biography of a historical Messiah. It is a Jewish reworking of ancient pagan myths of the dying and resurrecting god-man Osiris Dionysus, which had been popular for centuries throughout the ancient Mediterranean.
What we have here is a myth which has been literalized. Once you see that, then the whole history starts to fall into a new pattern.
What do you think? It's all the same stuff. Yeah, it's all the same stuff.
The beginnings of Christian history were almost nothing like the picture propagated by the priesthood. Christianity actually began as an amalgamation of many ancient beliefs and originally branched off from Gnosticism. Gnosticism was and is a school of religious existentialism that seeks intuitive understanding of God. The Gnostics focused on attaining gnosis, or spiritual knowledge. They refuted claims of blasphemy from the Orthodoxy, stating that they were the blasphemers. They said the Orthodoxy did not know who Christ is, and read the Bible, especially Genesis, too literally, missing the deeper meaning. Orthodox Christians insisted that Jesus Christ was a historical personage who came in the flesh, had 12 apostles, performed miracles, died on the cross, and was resurrected. The Gnostics insisted that their Christ could never take human form. Gerald Massey wrote, Christianity began as Gnosticism, refaced with falsehoods concerning a series of facts alleged to have been historical, but which are demonstrably mythical, by which I do not mean mythical as exaggerations or perversions of historic truth, but belonging to the pre-existent mythos. It is obvious that the Roman Church remained Gnostic at the beginning of the 2nd century, and for some time afterwards. Marcion, the great Gnostic, did not separate from it until about the year 136 AD. Titian did not break with it until long after that. In each case, the cause of quarrel was the same. They left the church that was setting up the fraud of historic Christianity. Acharya S. wrote, So Gnosticism was around long before so-called Orthodox Christianity. The conspirators used the word Docetism to refer to those who refused to believe in the incarnation of Jesus. The earliest Gnostic Christians were not even aware claims that the Christ incarnated in Jesus. Unbeknownst to the Gnostics, so-called Orthodox Christians like Pliny, the Roman Piso family, and others began to propagate the idea that Jesus Christ was a real person. Soon, under Roman law, the greatest heresy became the unacceptance of Jesus as being a historical figure. Bishop and Patriarch of Alexandria, Saint Athanasius, wrote, "Should we understand sacred writ according to the letter, we should fall into the most enormous blasphemies. In other words, it is a most enormous sin to read the Bible literally." Gerald Massey wrote, "The Docete sects, for example, are supposed to have held that the transactions of the gospel narrative did occur, but in a phantasmagoria of unreality. This, however, is but a false mode of describing the position of those who denied that the Christ could be incarnated and become human to suffer and die upon the cross. The Christians who report the belief of the Gnostics, Docete, and others always assume the actual history and then try to explain the non-human interpretation as an heretical denial of the alleged facts. But the Docetic interpretation was prehistorical. The Brotherhood created the term Docetism to pigeonhole Gnostics and pagan practitioners inside the kingdom. The Old Testament stories had long existed all over the ancient world, but were understood to be metaphorical. For instance, the Bible's first man was Adam, while in Egypt, Atum was the first man. In Babylon, he was Adamu. In India, he was Adima, and he was always warned against eating the fruit of immortality from the tree of life. Like the Bible's Eve, in Tahiti, the first woman, Evie, was made from the first man's bones. Like the Bible's Cain and Abel, the Tonga creation story says the son of the first man killed his brother. Acharya S. wrote, "The Hindu version of the first couple was Adima and Hiva, hundreds if not thousands of years before the Hebraic version, as has been firmly pointed out by Hindus to Christian missionaries for centuries. In the Hindu Somadeva Bhatta, Saktideva was swallowed by a huge fish and eventually came out unhurt. In the Grecian myth, Hercules is said to have been swallowed by a whale and laid for 3 days in his entrails before emerging. Do these remind you of Jonah and the whale? Did you know Sumerian tablets speak of Eden as the abode of the righteous ones, just as the Bible's Garden of Eden? King Sargon of Sumeria was said to have been set adrift in a basket down a river by his mother 4,500 years ago. This is the same story the Bible tells about Moses, but unbeknownst to most Christians, the same goes for Mises in Syria, Minos in Crete, Manau in India, and many more." Acharya S. wrote, "Mises is found in Syria, where he was pulled out of a basket floating in a river. Mises also had tablets of stone upon which laws were written, and a rod with which he did miracles, including parting waters and leading his army across the sea. The Scandinavian god Odin and Marsyas of Mindanao were said to be hung on a tree and stabbed with a spear, just as Jesus was said to be crucified and stabbed by Longinus' spear. Vishnu, Witoba, and Adonis were all crucified saviors, stabbed in the side as well. Christ, meaning the Anointed One, was a term applied to Attis, Adonis, Tammuz, Osiris, Krishna, and many other pre-Christian gods. Even the name Christ is a variation on Christ, Horus the Anointed One, or Krishna, commonly spelt Krishna or Christos in Bengali, thousands of years before Jesus supposedly walked the earth. Tony Bushby wrote, "The word Christo and its derivations, Christ, Christo, Kist, and Krishna, all appeared in every ancient religious system and showed the original Christo concept was believed to be the personal and invisible mediator and guide between God and everything spiritual in man. The Christ concept has been an ancient religious tradition continually suppressed by the Catholic Church through the centuries." Acharya S. wrote, "At the Council of Nicaea were not only Christian leaders from Alexandria, Antioch, Athens, Jerusalem, and Rome, but also the leaders of many other cults, sects, and religions, including those of Apollo, Demeter, Ceres, Dionysus, Bacchus, Iossos, Janus, Jupiter, Zeus, Dagon, Osiris, and Isis, and Sol Invictus, the invincible sun, the object of Constantine's devotion. The purpose of this council was to unify the various competing cults under one universal or Catholic Church, which, of course, would be controlled by Constantine and Rome. As noted, Rome claimed the ultimate authority because it purported to be founded upon the Rock of Peter. Thus, the statue of Jupiter in Rome was converted to St. Peter, whose phony bones were subsequently installed in the Vatican. In a typical religion-making move, the gods of these other cults were subjugated under a new god and changed into apostles and saints. As stated, it is maintained that during the Nicene Council, the names Jesus and Christ were put together for the first time in the phrase Jesus Christ or Christ Jesus, uniting two of the major factions, with Jesus representing the Jesus of the Druids, Joshua Jesus of the Israelites, Horus of the Egyptians, and Lesios of the Dionysians, and Christ representing the Krishna, Christos of India, the Anointed of the Jews, and Christ of Egypt, among others. It is thus alleged that the phrase Jesus Christ, which had never been a name, does not appear in Greek or Latin authors prior to the First Council of Nicaea."
A lot of he says, bro, you might be bored with him, but that dude knows a lot of shit. Like, he just rattles off fucking names like it's nothing. Anyway, yeah, this story is a bunch of bullshit.
Hogwash.
Yeah. So that's going to end part one.
All right.
We went through the story being the same as a whole bunch of others, and next episode we're going to go through where the story is kind of comes from, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, Godspeed, man. I'll see you next week.
Well, next week is Christmas, actually.
Merry Christmas, birthday, Jesus.
Next week.
Merry birthday, Jesus Christmas.
It's only the 16th. Wear your hat next week, too.
I'm not going to change. I'll be the same.
Well, I'm not gonna change either. Let's just finish.
Okay,
the
let's
episode
just.
of
All
These
right.
Close. Godspeed.
Everybody- Godspeed.
You've reached the offices of the Godspeed Podcast. We are currently closed. Please leave your information and someone will return your call within 24 business days. Thank you.
Nobody doubts at that time there's a cult of Christians. Just like there were all kinds of crazy-ass cults back in the day. Just because there are cults in the day doesn't mean the figures that the cults are worshiping were actually real. And obviously, there were cults back in the day that believed in Thor and Ra and Zeus and all kinds of other horse shit. Just because they believe in that bullshit does not mean those mythical characters actually existed. All we have about Jesus, period, are these fictional stories in the Bible written by anonymous authors. We have no clue who wrote the Bible. No clue at all. Go look it up for yourself. Even historians admit. They don't even have the originals. They don't even have copies of the originals. They don't even have copies of copies of the original. As far as Jesus is concerned, they have no historical evidence whatsoever.